The title of my dissertation was Marina Abramovich's The Artist is Present and the Convergence of Mindfulness Practice with Performance Art.
The title of my dissertation was Objects and Things, an exploration of bags through thing theory and luxury practice.
My dissertation title was Interactive Craft, and the subtitle was The Rules of the Game of Interaction.
Myceliality of Craft, a manifesto for contemplation of biophilic design.
Contemporary portrayal of the character of death itself in 3 books.
Rule of design, and then the subheading of that was observing the axiomatic construction of forged metal sculpture.
And Box and Identity, the role of Hermes packaging in shaping personal prestige and cultural capital.
Identity in illustration, analysing Vicky Linda's Dead Dad book. Discovering the collective through a body of psychoanalytical work.
Contextualising Wojak, the meme as illustration in the age of the post-internet.
The use of Stitch in self-improvement, how Stitch can alter the perception of self.
Making sense of anthropomorphies by Yves Klein.
Embellished achieving unattainability.
The whole dissertation actually related to my practice. It wasn't until I started researching into Vicky Lindo that I decided I wanted to go down the route of identity because I actually realised that I've been drawn to that my whole life, drawing. When I was younger, I used to draw women in rows and then have little bios next to them with their name, age, where they're from. So it's kind of like a surface level identity.
The overall factor is geometry, and that's what's linked into my practice now from my dissertation and me looking into sort of how geometry can be used by other makers and how it's sort of a fundamental tool in us as makers and throughout history, people creating and designing things. So that's how it's sort of linked into my practice, because I'm following those rules and those sort of processes used in geometry, and I'm sort of relating that into my investigation on my dissertation into why people are using it and how it's affecting their creative process, basically.
When you look at things like couture garments and you see how they're these amazing outfits which look like they're dripping in silk flowers or they're completely encrusted, and you look at them and think, wow, oh my gosh, how have they done that? So you're looking at these sort of very almost borderline fantasy garments and then figuring out actually how the tools and materials have been created to achieve this. And that's what I really look at within my own work, challenging the materiality of my practice.
It's a really important thing for me to be able to explore. It answered a lot of questions that I had because, as the name suggests, I like interactive stuff. So I kind of had to dive deep into how to sort of understand those objects, how to read those objects and what to do with them. So it kind of helped me in that way to allow my practice to now not only make sense, but it now informs my design, it informs my presentation, it informs it all, because I looked at all the key factors for what influences us as individuals. It's not just the object, it's the finish, the texture, the color, the environment that it's in, who it's audience to. All of those change what we do. And yeah, so for me, it's definitely impacted my practice massively.
Looking into the visual identity relates, I really like brand storytelling and visual identity, and I really love how just the simple design choices, color, typography communicates so much more. It's all meaning beyond the aesthetics.
When you're talking about memes as art, it really delves into highbrow and lowbrow, which is something that I find really relevant to the way I think and work as an artist.
From the get-go, I was trying to validate my own craft and what I was trying to do, and I was so happy in the end when I actually managed to get something properly intriguing, properly motivational out of it, and something that I can continue to expand on. especially through doing like a master's degree or anything like that. Because that was the reason that I went towards the manifesto as well, is that continually building, continually being this source of motivation.
Even though I don't make feminist work, for me, all the work I make is still feminist because it's what I believe in.
The rhetoric of The Artist is Present was looking at presence and interconnectivity and connection. And it's sort of looking at this transformative power of what happens within that human interaction, like what occurs within that space. And that's something that's become ever present in my practice as well. So it's looking at the nuances of exchanges between audience participation and myself as like a guide, like a facilitator. And that's something that I really resonated with Abramovich's practice.
So I related my dissertation to my project in order for me to discover the collective. So my project is called The Babbling Heads, and it's an aspiring sort of theatrical immersive production which incorporates traditionally forged props, oral storytelling, belly dance, burlesque, sort of traditional art forms all wrapped into one. And the goal of The Babbling Heads is to take people into their imaginations. Because in my opinion, the imagination is the most potent place that any of us can go to. It's where we discover the parts of ourselves that we don't meet on a day-to-day basis. So my body of psychoanalytical work within that project, in order to get to the show where the collective is born, between performance and audience, is a book that I'm writing at the moment. Within the book, you have these different characters, and they're all facets of myself, therefore facets of other people. And within writing the book, I was digging into myself. It was like a private world that I was creating that was a reflection of my own, that was like masked in metaphorical language. So I got to share like these darker parts of myself without really sharing them objectively. Any book that you read is open to anyone's interpretation and how you feel towards the characters, how they relate to you, how you learn lessons from what they've done differently to or the same as you. So my body of psychoanalytical work was writing that book, understanding myself more. When it comes to the performance, you're giving it over. Like, you're giving the characters to other people, and that's quite like, yeah, I don't know, it's like handing yourself over sort of thing. So discovering the collective from that body of work was to connect with the performers, connect them to the characters, and whilst doing that, you're opening up the audience to do the same thing.
So I'm really keen on making things that are functional and have a use. I hate making something and then putting it in a box and leaving it there. Like, I want to make things that are actually useful. So exploring sort of thing theory and how something is either a thing or an object was really interesting for me, and it's really sort of impacted how I look at things and objects now in everyday life and what I'm making as well. So yeah.
What's really interesting is seeing how a craft evolves over time. In order for a craft to survive and thrive as well, especially in the age of technology where things are being constantly trying to be made quicker, cheaper, we do need to embrace new tools.
One of the things that I've taken from it is including handwritten text in my work, because in my dissertation I had a section where I wrote about and looked at Grace and Perry and Vicky Lindo and the way that they have handwritten text a lot in their work, and it creates a deeper connection between the audience and the illustrator, because it's like looking into their diary. So that's actually something that I've included in my current project, and definitely something I'm going to include later on down the line as well.
Illustration and children's picture book invite the readers to talk about death and dying, and to see that it's okay, and there can be compassion and care and tenderness in that world. Well, I'm very interested in that subject, I think, because I'm a nurse outside the college, and I work in the hospice, so I deal with death and dying. Somehow, when somebody dies, it's very important to appreciate what this person leaves behind, all the memories. And so somehow I translated the fun and play in fun and play memories for children that they can treasure in their heart for the rest of their lives. And that has been wonderful, having known their granny. So my little story has a granny and 2 children, and I go through the 4 seasons. My work as an illustrator is very much in a vein of delicate subject, like death and dying and grief, but also environmental issues such as pollution of the sea, which I'm doing my final project on. It's sort of themes which are a little bit on the edge, so they may be less commercial.
A lot of it works with very, very heavy topics. So practice 5 was looking at racial prejudice throughout my life. I took phrases, the insults that people had hurled at me from a very young age, and I turned them into piss-take patches. I laced them full of humor, and it was so life-changing for me. By the end of the project, I hadn't even noticed just how much it had changed the way I viewed myself. It didn't hurt anymore. It was really, really cathartic for me and for my father as well. When he saw the final project, he loved it because he'd suffered with so many of those things himself. And then when I sort of finished that over Christmas and picked up my writing for dissertation again, the more I started looking at dissertation, the more I went, oh wow, I've kind of accidentally done what I'd spent months writing about without realizing. And I didn't quite at the time sort of think how deeply ingrained in my practice it was until I looked at the two side by side and went, oh yeah, what my dissertation is about is unintentionally what my making is. It really did change how I viewed myself, and I hadn't even noticed that the two were happening side by side. So it really was sort of taking that step back and going, I'm actually really proud of that. I had no idea I was doing that. It was amazing.
The most interesting discovery I made during my work is when things that I found out started to trickle back into me. So like, I basically just I think because of writing my dissertation, I had this stump with the book, and I couldn't get into the world that I was creating. I couldn't get into that babbling heads world. I couldn't dip into it. I don't know. And I started wanting to do it. At times where I've gone down again, I have come back to the book and I've gone back into characters and therefore back into myself. But yeah, that sort of moment was where I was like, I want to put on a show. Like, I need to put on a show. I need to share it with other people. I need to see how other people interpret the characters. And I went from being like Aurelia, who's the main character, like Aurelia, to like, oh my God, you are so similar to Aurelia. Like, would you like to play Aurelia in this thing? And to have that trust of someone else from this part of myself and realizing Aurelia lives within everyone. So the most interesting thing was when that research, that horrible, grueling research of a dissertation, started to benefit me as an artist.
I really loved looking into all the theory and seeing, I don't know, it just seemed like it related so much to Hermes and I could see it all working. I explored semiotics, signalling theory, cultural capital, and conspicuous consumption.
So mine was heavily based on Martin Heidegger's theory of thing theory, looking at the theory of things, also at his jug theory and like the potential holding of an object, and whether that is what we gain value from more so than the object itself. I also looked at Don Norman and his affordance and signifiers theory, which was quite interesting because it coincided really well with thing theory, and it's also impacted my work massively and has given me kind of a new look on how I design things and how I might sort of consider aspects of my design as I go forward.
It was a really important thing for me to be able to explore. It answered a lot of questions that I had because, as the name suggests, I like interactive stuff. So I kind of had to dive deep into how to sort of understand those objects, how to read those objects and what to do with them. I explored a lot. I explored aesthetics of like objects. So that's things like affordance theory. So what an object looks like and how that makes us want to work with it and interact with it. I looked at psychology. So people like Margaret Bowden, who talks about how our senses evolved not only to inform our actions, but to prompt them. So if you see a tiger, you don't say, oh, a tiger. You go, oh no, a tiger, and you try and run away. So that's kind of her thing. And then also positive psychology by, I'm going to butcher his name, Mihail Csikszentmihalyi, I think his name is. And he talks about flow theory. It's where the challenge and the skill required to do something is equal. And you enter this flow state where time just kind of melts away and you're so absorbed, you're in the zone and you're in the flow, that's the flow state. So yeah, understanding that helped me to not only design, but then also think about how my audience would interact with the objects that I make. So it gave me a way of basically psychologically seeing how they would perceive it and how I could design it to encourage those perceptions.
It's given me a better understanding of what makes an object sort of have those qualities that you want to be closer to it and you want to be near it and you want it to become a thing, which has then allowed me to build those into my designs. So my designs are a lot more thought about now. I'm thinking of aspects of affordance and what the potential of the bag is. So it's not how I design it and say, okay, this bag is for this. It's that affordance of, I could interpret it as this, but the next person can interpret it as something completely different. It's how they afford it to themselves. So that's been really interesting, and having a bit more of an open mind on that and not being quite so tunnel vision about it and being, this is my bag and this is how you will use it. It's more a case of, no, this is a bag and you can interpret how you use it and how it, becomes an object or a thing, hopefully, to you. Yeah.
The death of the author is basically going against the fact that for so long, when an artist creates a body of work, we're like, but why did they do it? What meaning were they tried to give to the audience? Like, what was wrong with them at the time, sort of thing. And it's like, you put so much attention into that person, it's none of your business. That's not the point in art. The death of the author basically says that when you produce a body of art, it's open to the audience. It's open, and that's you're gifting them something. You're gifting them access to their imagination. So it's no longer about the artist, it's about how they interpret it. And that's the collective. Otherwise, we're treating every single piece of art as a body of psychoanalysis, but that's personal for the author. That's your language where words fail. Once that art is made and it's put out into the world, it's up for the audience to feel, to get that feeling. And there's not a lot more in the world other than art where we get access to that feeling, those unknown parts of ourselves that reside so deep in our minds. So I was basically like, yes, the death of the author, no to treating art like, I don't know, like a dissection of the artist's brain, like none of your business, go away.
The postulates of Euclid, that's the one. Those were like the set of rules he set at the beginning of his book to define what geometric principles are. So how to construct a straight line, how to construct a circle, what 90 degrees is. They existed before he said all those things, but he was the first person to give a short, definitive answer.
I was studying a biologist called Richard Dawkins, who believed that the meme is a cultural equivalent of the gene, which is something that's really human and spreads through means of imitation. So that led me to think about other theory aspects like aura and mechanical reproduction and the artist versus the brand through a really interesting lens of human versus machine. When talking about internet art and anything that relates to the internet, you also have to talk about the idea of truth, and that truth is no longer a given facet of anything that you're viewing online, which in turn has sort of generated unintentionally a real want and hunger for lowbrow, crudely drawn, very messy, obviously human-made art in an art market.
And there were a couple of very, very smart people that I tried my best to understand their philosophy and their theory, and it was really helpful. It was really grounding to see how what I was looking at is something that is seriously studied. It felt really, I don't know, really encouraging to see that what I felt so strongly about is something that is a serious topic, and to see that they're being studied at like the highest academic levels you can find. It was really, really interesting to see just how much they've researched into it. And it was amazing to see just how sort of important it is in the crafting community.
I mainly looked into feminist critics, including The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir. And I also looked into The Male Gaze Theory by Laura Mulvey. It definitely has made me more passionate about research and like critiquing, and I think I would love to do more of it now, because it just made me so like angry, but then with that excited to do this research. And like even past it now, I still want to buy more feminist critics books, find more of these feminist critics who speak on this, because I think they're more overlooked. I think we look up to so many people without realizing kind of the underlying issues of their work, and I like, it's made me more passionate to look into these women and these critics. So
it's amazing what voice comes from your research. So yeah, you get to know yourself a lot better.
The theory I used helped me structure my dissertation. That's what I find the hardest, is like structuring an essay, because usually I just write it and then it'll be all over the place. So this really, really helped me, yeah.
I used to hate writing. Like for my English literature, I got a D in that. Yeah, so I wasn't that confident, but I think you kind of, if you look at it kind of as something that's going to help you in your career and in your practice, then you kind of got a different headspace to it.
I've had a lot of battles with Rebecca about, why do you like this thing? And it's like, well, it looks nice, that's why I like it. And it's like, yeah, but why? And it was finding that why, which has very much helped do my dissertation, because I was really struggling with like writing stuff. I mean, I was not the best essay writer in the world. I was not the best at English in the world or doing anything. I got a 2 in my English language, which is not good. But from there to now, I've improved a lot in my essay writing. And I feel like having my dissertation link to my practice helped that massively, because it's now interesting to write about my essay because it's my practice. And then you can actually research about your practice in your dissertation. And then one will inform the other and one will go back. So it was very much, I was doing my dissertation and being like, oh, I've just found this guy, Benjamin Betts. Now he's in my sketchbook from a practice 4, 5 and 6. And then I've been doing something in there looking at Peter Penix, for example, from my practice 5 and 6. And I was like, wow, what he's doing is sort of relating to my dissertation. And then the line between dissertation and practice sort of blurs even more. And then it becomes easy writing what it was. And I had to cut a load out of my essay because I was writing too much. But I mean, that's definitely a good position to be in. And it's very nice to be in that position, knowing I want to actually write my essay.
The theories, the knowledge and understanding that I've gained, the ins and outs, the nitty-gritty aspects to my practice as well, it's shaped it phenomenally. It's it's really highlighted a lot. I have a clearer understanding of myself through doing the dissertation as well.
So it's looking at all what other people have done and sort of picking little nuggets and feeding my own creativity with those special little treasures along the line. So no, it was a real journey of discovery, very enriching on many levels, personal as well as professionally and creatively.
Going through various texts and seeing where there was overlap between different people, because they were all kind of talking about the same thing, but it was sort of, oh, there's a quote or there's a segment here that matches really well with the segment from here. So I also looked at a guy called John Dewey, who talks about art as experience. and he talks about the psychological, emotional affecting the biological, physical. And he sort of talks about how, again, so our minds impact how we physically interact with things. Okay, cool. So he's talking about that. Margaret Bowden's talking about how we perceive things. So that's, okay, there's mirrors here between these two. And then Tim Ingold, who's another fantastic author and does tons of stuff. He talks about craft as a process of growth. So it's working with the material and kind of like a dialogue, and you're kind of allowing it to shape itself. And it's like, okay, so there's allowing you to shape the material, how the material wants to move, which in turn shapes how we perceive the material, which in turn shapes how we want to interact with it. And it's like, okay, it's all working together in a weird way. And I've just got to kind of pick out the bits that work for me.
For me, getting the sort of like that aha kind of moment every now and then, and it just pushing it so much further, and having little thoughts that seemed completely pointless, but then in that mycelial kind of way actually branched out without you really seeing it. It latched onto a new idea and became, the full essay. Just knowing that something's happening, even when you don't realize it, is an interesting one when doing the essay.
I don't think it could be any more entwined than it already is. The two really do sit side by side. I think that's what's so important about it. It's using dissertation to really solidify your morals and your ideas as a maker, because you're given the opportunity to explore something that's so close to you, to really take a hold of that. And it just, even without me realizing at the time, when I think about my dissertation and my work, I could talk for hours about it with anybody, but they are just one and the same. It's just one thing now, it's great. Without me even noticing it had wormed its way into my subconscious, I was just doing everything, and it made writing about it so much easier, because then I didn't have to force anything. I really could just sort of spew my heart onto the page, do some heavy editing, and then hand it in, because it made it such an easier thing to produce when my heart and soul was in it. I didn't feel like I had to scrounge for research and really try and sort of patchwork it together. It all just sort of flowed when it was something that really mattered.
Stay tenacious, stay like digging, keep researching, keep going, because even if it's okay, it's good, it's fine, it's whatever, there will be something, and then suddenly it will like click way more, and that's it, that kind of like snap, that aha snap moment, and suddenly everything makes sense, things start falling into place. It affects your practice informs your dissertation, and it all kind of feeds into it, and it just becomes a much more enjoyable experience, and it also becomes a much more beneficial experience as well.